I'm hearing a lot of men's rights advocates being like, oh, women start all the divorces. Right. Your eyebrows are also in business for themselves the same way mine are. So I think this is going to go great.
There's a reason why I don't play poker.
Welcome to the Indomitable Podcast. I'm your host, ciruolo, and today we have another great episode that will leave you inspired. Today's guest is the indomitable Michele Locke. Michelle's distinguished career in family law includes her tenure as an associate municipal court judge, a role she embraces with dedication and empathy. In her private practice, Michele specializes in a comprehensive range of family law services, including divorce, custody, child support, and family violence. Her practice is dedicated to advocating for the rights and well-being of her clients and ensuring they receive the highest level of legal representation during their most challenging moments. Well, hello, Judge Michele. I am so excited to have you here today.
Thank you. It's an absolute honor to be here as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. So if you wouldn't mind, just fill in the blanks here, talk a little bit about yourself, and let us know what I've left out here.
I've been practicing law since 2002. I started off in far west Texas, specifically El Paso, Texas. At the time, my husband was a prosecutor in El Paso, and it's where I grew up, but I always swore I'd never go back. But met a man who had two young girls. They were 3 and 5 when we got together. And despite, I think, his willingness to move wherever I wanted to move after I finished law school, I wasn't going to have 2 little girls lose their father. And so I made the commitment to stay in El Paso with him until the youngest one graduated from high school. And that's what we did. When she graduated from high school in 2015, I moved back to Central Texas in 2016. I've been pretty fortunate in my career. We always talk about luck, but, luck may open some doors, but it's kind of what you do with those open doors that kind of gets you where you are in your life. I was very fortunate to have trial experience very, very early on in my career in some pretty serious cases. I started off in defense work a little bit in my career because that was the quickest way to get into a courtroom. And I worked as co-counsel on a capital murder case at 28.
Wow.
I did my first felony trial, I think at 27. I picked another jury out of 180 people by myself as a defense attorney around the same time. Had my first child at 26, my second child at 28, my third child at 38. No, not an accident. I wanted to try for a girl before I got too old, but God said, no, you get another boy. So I'm a mom to 3 boys, which is fabulous.
Yes.
I became a judge for the first time in 2009. Excuse me, that was for the city of El Paso, and that's where I was the associate municipal court judge. And my responsibilities there range from handling the docket as it related to Class C citations, but also signing warrants, arrest warrants, search warrants, emergency magistrate protective orders for victims of domestic violence. I did that until about 2011. In 2011, I was fortunate enough again to be appointed as an associate family court judge for the 65th District Court, and it was a newly created court that handled strictly domestic violence cases. We handled approximately 90% of the protective order applications for El Paso County, and then all of the family law matters that came out of it. So every divorce, child custody that came out of a domestic violence situation ended up in my court. So it was really the ugly of the ugly.
Right.
At the same time, I handled, for a period of time, the Child Protective Services docket. And then I also, at the same time, handled the drug court that related to people that were losing their children due to addiction through the CPS system. And so we had this drug court to help them maintain the sobriety so they could keep their children. I did that for 5 years and then moved out to Central Texas, started my practice, reinvented myself all over again, and then was fortunate enough within 3 years of moving back to Central Texas to become an associate municipal court judge for the city of Lakeway. That was in 2019. And then I was made the presiding court judge for the city of Lakeway last year, I think October of 2023. So really, I've worn multiple hats. I've been a judge in one way
Yes.
or another for most of my career. I became a judge for the first time, I think, at age 31. And I'm
Wow.
now I'm 47 going on 48. But I hesitate to say I've seen it all and done it all. Because the minute you say that, the next thing walks through your door, you're like, well, this is a first.
Once you speak it into the universe, it's going to feel like it's a challenge, right? Yes. That's exactly the same reason why I never say my kid would never. Because
Correct.
second you do that, they will take it as a challenge. I completely agree. So, as you know, I went through the foster care system as well. So, I have a lot of experience with being on the other side of that family law conversation. I do a lot of talks about foster care and sort of my experiences. Actually, it's hilarious. I was just earlier this summer in June, I came out for the T-Noise conference. So, and I. When I tell you, I thought I knew about Southern heat. I lived in Atlanta for 10 years. And like when they invited me, it was going to be at the beginning of June. I was like, oh, I've totally got this. It's going to be fine. I know all about No. I couldn't even, I mentioned it in my actual speech. I was like, y'all, this is unreal heat. Like I couldn't even step out from underneath an awning to get a signal to call Uber. I get why y'all are intense. This is amazing.
It is. You sweat in places you didn't know you could sweat down here. Until you've been here, you have no idea.
Oh my gosh, just going down the highways, every single sign was for accidents. I was like, what is happening here?
Yeah, we have some bad drivers occasionally too.
I guess. I was like, is my life at risk in this Uber? Oh my God. Anyway, so I am so excited to hear about sort of your experiences. First of all, I guess the primary one we're talking about these days is sort of divorce and what the media is describing is sort of the great American divorce here, where so many people are getting to the place where they're like, you know what, this isn't it for me. I'm watching sort of a lot of women's movements move in that direction, and I'm hearing a lot of men's rights advocates being like, oh, women start all the divorces. Right. Your eyebrows are also in business for themselves the same way mine are. So I think this is going to go great.
There's a reason why I don't play poker.
I do.
I have a terrible poker face.
I also don't play poker. I have a terrible poker face. I don't, I keep myself out of situations where I need to have a serious face. So, how do you feel about the movement toward divorce and how that's impacting families?
So that's a really interesting topic for so many reasons. The one thing I can tell you I've noticed is that the divorce rate, and I couldn't tell you if the statistics bear this out, I can just tell you in my own personal practice, it seems that the divorce rate has kind of increased substantially since COVID.
Right.
And I have several theories on that, but one of the main reasons that I noticed about COVID is because everyone was stuck at home. So you had traveling spouses that only saw each other in passing. You had ones that worked different shifts that they only saw each other in passing. And those relationships worked before COVID because they didn't have to deal with each other.
Right.
You put two people in the same house, and if there's any kind of strife, it gets a whole lot worse during a lockdown.
Yeah.
Then you have a lot of people that stay together for the children. There are pluses and minuses to that. I could tell you the pluses and minuses from personal experience, but I think COVID taught us that life changes in a dime, changes in a second.
Yeah.
I remember going to work the week before spring break where COVID was just kind of being mentioned. And I remember my office manager mentioned, well, we may have to shut down the office. And both one of my law partners and I were like, you've got to be kidding. Like, I mean, we're in court all the time. There's no way it's getting shut down. This is a joke.
Right.
Yeah, 5 days later, it was shut down. And then we didn't go back again in person for over a year. I mean, the world came to a stop, and in the law practice and the court system had to navigate something that they had never navigated before and were forced to become modern, which thank goodness they did.
Right.
But I say that because you get to a point in your life where you look at the person sitting next to you and you may love that person with all your heart because you had 2 children with them or whatever else, but there has become something fundamentally broken in that relationship and it's not going to get better no
Right.
matter how much you try, because unless you have a partner that's willing to acknowledge what those issues are and move forward, it's not going to get fixed. I've also learned recently realized recently that there is a time for everything. There's a season for everything.
Right.
And sometimes marriages aren't meant to last the entirety of the season of your life.
Right.
And that's a hard one to swallow because at some point you're taught that you're a failure if you can't make it work.
Yes.
But we change as we grow. Our life experiences change us. I think there is more of a movement now of people realizing how personality disorders affect relationships.
Right.
And at
Right.
least, I know that men's groups say that women start it and we're terrible, but I got to tell you, by the time a woman starts a divorce, she was done 2 years ago.
Oh my God. Tell us why. I completely, yes.
And it
Well,
wasn't just like she woke up one morning and said I was done. It was
no.
years and years and years of her swallowing it and
Right.
just deciding, I'm done. I'm
Yes.
done carrying the load of everything on my shoulders. I'm
Right.
done telling you I need help. I need help.
Mm-hmm.
You're breaking me. You're breaking me. And it
Mm-hmm.
falling on deaf ears.
Yes.
But it takes 2 for a relationship to end. I'm not
Right.
saying that one side is always bad. And there are some bad women. I'm going to tell those men. Because I
Yes.
represent a lot of men. Yes,
Yep.
I understand why you're getting divorced. It makes
Mm-hmm.
complete sense.
Mm-hmm.
So it
Mm-hmm.
goes both ways, but
Yeah.
sometimes relationships just need to end. And the
Mm-hmm.
other thing I will tell people, and forgive me for rambling,
Please
is
ramble.
sometimes they say, well, let's wait until the children graduate. I'm going to
Yeah.
tell you,
Yeah.
divorce is oftentimes a lot easier on the younger than the
Mm-hmm.
older children
Mm.
because the older children start taking sides and one parent inevitably loses out for various
Wow.
reasons and through no fault of that parent's own. But a lot of times it's easier on the younger kids.
Wow. Valid. So, I guess my next question for you is, in the pandemic, when everything was closed down, did you see like that push to reopen family courts as quickly as possible because of, I mean, I just remember when I was going through the pandemic, I was thinking to myself, oh my God, it's so hard to have young kids that you are trying to support and keep entertained, which then went to keep educated and keep, socialized. But I realized, even in just my own experience, I was grateful to not still be like in foster care trying to do a pandemic, or in, in the abusive situations I was in as a child, being in the pandemic and being stuck at home with my abuser. Was that something that you saw a lot of cases on, where women were just like, I guess what I'm asking is, did that get better or did that get worse with the pandemic?
So I will say this, the courts reopened up as quickly as possible
Right.
because they had to really reinvent how they operate. And it took them a little bit of time to get that done. That being
Right.
said, at least the judges in Central Texas, I absolutely commend them for how quickly they got up back and running. I remember that
Yeah.
I'd done a jury trial in, I think, November of 19, right before COVID. And my
Mm.
very first hearing, and I think one of the first Zoom hearings when Travis County started back up was
Mm.
April. I forget when in April, but it was April of 2020. So there was probably a 6-week delay that I can remember getting back into court. But the
Right.
courts really worked diligently to figure out a solution because you cannot have victims of domestic violence, and I'll say this, both sides of the spectrum. Men get abused, women get abused.
Right.
But when you've got people stuck in the same home during a pandemic and someone's getting
Yes.
abused, that someone has got to have an access to a court to
Absolutely.
get some kind of help. I mean, it definitely was a challenge.
Right. Right. That's exactly how I imagined. Because again, I was so scared for everybody, because then what else started happening is like, people would talk about how to, you know, let someone know that you're being abused over Zoom and what you should do in that situation. And I was just like, oh my God, this is happening on multiple levels throughout. This is going to exacerbate pieces of society that aren't being held together by anything but, women wanting to keep society going. So I was completely stunned. And I think that's amazing that it was front of mind for a lot of the judicial system. So
in my experience, it was.
I'm grateful to hear that. I'm grateful for that.
The other thing I will tell you is that, and anyone that's involved in the CPS system knows that teachers are some of the front lines for reporters of abuse.
Yes.
And so when you've got children at home that are in the house with the abuser and the teachers are only seeing them via Zoom, I mean, that in and of itself was a whole dynamic that needed to get addressed. It was a tough time, but a learning time. And it was amazing to me how quickly the courts were able to pivot, which in order to succeed in life, you have to be able to pivot. And they did the best they could given the circumstances. But I also think that's why the divorce rate and people are saying enough, because people are now pivoting and saying, I don't want this anymore.
I don't want this for my life anymore, especially if we're in a situation where anything could happen at any time. That is an excellent point. So what types of cases are you sort of seeing the most of in this day and age?
I'm probably the wrong person to ask that question, because I usually only get hired on complex, highly contested litigation. Texas, I think, is the only state left in the country that allows jury trials in family law matters. Crazy.
Oh, wow.
I know.
Right. Oh, wow.
Right. So because of that, I try a fair amount of jury trials. I think last year I did 3 jury trials in 13 months, which in the family law system on the divorce side is really
that's
not
heavy.
common. Not common at all. But yeah, Texas is the only state left that does it.
Why? I mean, I
don't want our legislatures.
Sorry, I'm curious, because it's kind of the same thing as like no fault divorce, where we're trying to get rid of that, and I'm just like, but why? Like,
I wish I had an answer. And there's pluses and minuses to both sides of it.
Sure.
But to me, it's kind of terrifying having, if you're in district court, you have 12 people just make the decision. And if you're in county court, you have 6 people make the decision of what happens to these children. And a lot of times, I mean, if you're picking from the general public, they don't have any idea about parental alienation or the nuances in family law. But then again, if you get stuck with a bad judge who doesn't care about the nuances of family law, it may be just as bad. I don't know. I can just tell you, Texas is the only state left that allows it to happen.
Right. I worry about that just from my own experience, because it's pretty, anytime I talk about the type of life I've had, the type of intersections I've had with the justice system, I'm always very surprised by how little people know about what goes on in family court and family law. So that is very disconcerting, because it sort of seems like people learn what the legal system is from television. And right. So it sort of feels as if like family court would also be a victim of that. And that's tragic, because children deserve better. And I feel like as a society, all of these children that exist within the US are all of our responsibility. We are parents, they're our kids. So to not know anything about it, to not want to learn anything about it, I get that feedback a lot. Sometimes people won't want to read my book. They're just like, oh, I don't want to know anything about that. And I'm like, that must be amazing. That must be incredible, to go through life not needing to know things because you never had to. And I think that's sad for kids, because kids don't ask to be in the position that they're in. In fact, they are more devastated than everybody else that they are in that position. How has your experience? So I always got the feedback that like my time in foster care was my own fault. You know how we kind of think about foster kids as having sort of a hand in their own terrible experiences? We sort of feel like because they are fighting to stay with their family, that they must then be supporting the actions of the parent. I have always found, I have always found that just because kids want to stay with their parents or in a normal family situation because they're scared of foster care doesn't necessarily mean that we want to be abused or we want to be harmed. We are usually the victims in that scenario. Why do you think society looks at victims that way?
Man, I'd like to use an expletive at the moment, but I'm not going to.
Right.
To say that, the natural bond between parents and children is there no matter whether there's abuse or not.
Yes.
The children always think, if I can be better, stay there, do something to make them happy, they'll love me, they'll approve of me, that it'll be okay and this too shall pass.
Right.
Children that are victims of child abuse, and I'm not gonna say I've seen it all, but I've seen enough that I don't want to see it anymore.
Right.
It's not their fault. It's
right.
And it kind of goes back to the same example that applies to domestic violence.
Yes.
People say, well, why do they stay? Why do they stay if they're being abused? Why do they stay? And that's physical or psychological.
Yes.
And unless you've lived it or truly listened to the people that have been involved in it, it's extremely difficult to understand the scenario, the drive to want to stay, the drive to want to fix things, the drive to not want to be seen as a failure, to say that I didn't give up, that I can fix it, the difficulty in just walking away and closing that chapter, and the realities about people are going to look at you when you walk away and close that chapter. There are so many dynamics that go into it. To ever blame a child that never asked to be brought in that situation, that never asked for a parent to be an alcoholic, to never ask to have their parents use them as ashtrays, that never asked to be starved or withheld food. They never asked for that. But at the end of the day, they love their parents. And the fear of the unknown is sometimes so much worse than the known, because at least the known, you can navigate it. You've been designed to navigate it. You've lived in it. You know how to avoid the punches. You know how to avoid the ugly words. You know when to go hide when dad's been drinking too much. You know those things. And you go to a foster system, and that's a complete unknown. And that is one of the reasons why. And if people just understood that, that's the same in domestic violence. At least I know the boundaries of when he's going to be a jerk or not, or at least I know the boundaries of when she's going to flip her lid or not. There's times where you can smell it. When you can walk into a house and go, "Ooh, it's fight time."
Yep.
Right. But it's a known quantity. It's a known matter. The unknown is so much scarier.
So much scarier. Absolutely. And oftentimes not very safe either, right? So we are,
unfortunately not.
Yeah, we are constantly defunding these systems that need more support, more money, more oversight. And then we all kind of throw our hands up in the air like, guess it can't be fixed. I think I think you're exactly right. First of all, that it is not just child abuse, but it's also like domestic violence and spousal abuse. But it's also when we see it in rape cases as well. What was she wearing? Where was she? Right? So it sort of feels like there is this fantasy that if we can blame the victim of the crime, then we would not be made victims ourselves, right? There sort of seems to be...
That is the point. It is
right.
If we can differentiate ourselves from the victim, then we won't be a victim too. And the reality is, I don't care color, race, gender, socioeconomic status. I don't care who you are. Anyone can be a victim. It's just a matter of the right circumstances to allow that to happen. And you can be the smartest, most educated person on domestic violence in the world and still fall subject to it.
What would you say? I mean, you're a parent. What would you say are some of the things that you have taught your kids that maybe go against sort of common sense, right? So I have mine. I have my own things.
I'm sure my boys have stories about the things I've said because I've seen a lot.
Yeah.
I'm very brutally honest to them about it. A lot of it relates to birth control with women.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I hate to say it, but I've told, and it's not going to be politically correct, and I'm sure there'll be some pushback on this, but I've told my boys, if they say they're on birth control, they're lying.
Right.
And said, do not rely on anyone else. And again, that's a blanket statement, but do not rely on anyone else to protect your interests. You have
Right.
to protect your interests. So
Right.
you just need
You're
to
responsible
assume
for your body. Yes.
you are responsible for it. So don't believe anything they say. If they say, well, I have an IUD, well, then you better find the sticker that has expiration date and check with the doctor that installed it. I mean, and that again, those are things that most moms wouldn't normally say, I don't think, but I am brutally honest with my boys about it.
You know, we teach children to be smaller to avoid predators, right? So we teach them, oh, no, you need to hide or look down or any of those sorts of things when passing groups of men. For me, I went the other way with it. I was like, that has absolutely not been my experience. That's how I was raised, but that's not true. In my own experience, as someone who's been a victim, I should not have made myself smaller, quieter, any of those things. What I should have done was got loud, be big, take up my space, bark if necessary. But if you imagine people who have experienced sexual assault, the reoccurrence rate is like 50%. And I think it has a lot to do with how we teach people.
And one of my mottos, if you look at any of the material I put out there, it is you be your bold self. Mm-hmm. You don't quiet yourself for anyone. You don't do anything other than be your authentic self at all times. Yes. And I will say this, that's the one thing that my mom got so right with raising me, is she let me be me. And I got to tell you, I was a whole lot, but never once did she tell me to not be me. She may have told me to lower my voice at times because I'm a little loud, but that's come with age. And now all my boys are very loud, and I'm just not telling them to not be that, because, you learn to soften your edges as you get a little older, right? But you need to have the ability to soften your edges, not already have those edges so softened that you disappear.
That's absolutely true. And I mean, because I have a daughter who is exactly what I deserve, I can tell you honestly, if you need it, there's not a lot you can do when you have girls like us. I mean, I can polish some edges, but the edges are going to stay, right? Like, those aren't going anywhere. Like, no. I can teach her that she shouldn't say the things that are popping into her mind all the time, but I think I'm going to hit that at like 50-50.
Sometimes just let them be it. Let them be it.
She's here to do something. All I can do is make her nicer about it. Just like you're going to be who you were going to be, and that was always going to be the case, right?
Yeah, my mom was never going to change the core of who I was, which is right. Fine.
Yes.
Did she try and soften the edges? God bless, she sure did.
She sure tried, yeah.
She sure tried. And I remember her telling me once, Michele, it's going to take a very special person to love you. And I'm like, yeah, because I'm a whole lot. Because can you imagine this voice in junior high?
Yes.
The poor boys ran screaming the opposite direction from me.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. I mean, I'm the same. I tell my daughter all the time, I'm like, baby, I hope your wife is a really good one, because I don't know any men that are going to be able to perform at the level that you need somebody to perform at. Like, I'm excited for you. You're going to do great.
Keep our fingers crossed.
I know. Like, oh, please. Oh, I know. I can't imagine it, but I'm sure when we get there, I'm going to be delighted. So anyway, in this day and age, what are the types of things that people might be going through or saying to themselves before they should reach out to someone like you or someone in your field?
When someone, it goes back to the older you get, the more you trust your gut.
Yeah.
When you start listening to your gut and start listening to your body, you will realize when it's time. The problem is, and I went through a lot of this in my own history, especially with my medical conditions, is that you stop ignoring that inner voice. You start ignoring your gut, and you think it'll pass. It's not gonna. One of my law partners told me the definition of insanity is going back to the same situation over and over again and expecting a different result.
Yes.
And that's kind of a mantra that's run through my head for a while now. And it's true. If you start saying that it's just not getting better, it's not going to change, that you're still crying, that you're still having panic attacks, that your health is still deteriorating, I don't care what anyone says. Stress in a relationship, stress in a marriage takes a toll on your body. Yes. And if you're not paying attention to your body falling apart, then you're going to have some bigger issues down the road. And that's what I encountered. I ended up having, between November of 2020 and May of this year, I've had 12 surgeries, of which 6 have been major. And I absolutely blame it on the stress. Absolutely. I had some of my own issues, and I'm not going to say it was all stress, but I ignored the effect that the stress had on my body. And when I finally got through the last surgery and was able to look back at what I'd gone on the last 3.5 years, I should have paid attention a lot sooner. But raising kids gets in the way. A career gets in the way. Taking care of everyone else's needs instead of yours gets in the way. So that, to say there's some light, some flicker that says, okay, now it's time to go, there's not. But if you start realizing you're thinking more and more about, I've got to get out, this is not good, this is not healthy, those little gnawing pieces is when you need to start listening and go get at least enough information so that you're informed. I always tell at least clients in Texas, and I will tell clients quite honestly, you're not ready for divorce yet. Because you can meet them and you're like, you're not ready yet. And you tell them that, and that's okay. You don't have to be ready. Everyone's journey is personal. Everyone has the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back, but there are some that come in that just clearly are not ready, and that's men and women. And so you give them some advice. You tell them what you think they should take into consideration and how they start preparing for an ultimate divorce if that's where they're headed. And so you give them some tips on what to do and how to handle things. But when you get that gnawing, okay, this isn't right, there's something wrong, there's a reason for that. Pay attention to it.
So what we always hear, and the joke that sort of goes around the internet was, it came out of nowhere, right? Like, the divorce came out of nowhere. Is that your experience with this? That do you often hear that it came out of nowhere? Is that kind of a joke in your mind as well?
Yeah, people will say it came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
I've heard it many times. And my thought immediately on that is, then you chose to ignore it.
Right.
Because no divorce comes out of nowhere. None.
Right.
The writing is on the wall usually several years in advance. There are the occasions of maybe someone decided they were no longer interested in that same gender and so wanted to. But even then, I'm going to say it's still not a surprise.
Still not a surprise, right?
Still not a surprise. So I don't know. I mean, maybe there's a few exceptions. There's some women that say they're 9 months pregnant and go to the hospital and deliver and they didn't know they were pregnant. I've had 3 children. I don't know how that's possible, but maybe.
I know, that TV show came out, I was shocked. I was like, I can't believe there's enough for a show. That's amazing. Right? I know it.
I mean, yes, there may be some that are genuine surprises. Right. I think mostly that's not the case.
Right. There is so much stigma associated when women actually go or anybody, but especially when women go and file for divorce, that I think that they have gotten themselves, as you said, to a place where they've tried for years to make it work for any number of reasons. What do you say to folks who have finally gotten through that point and might be facing that societal stigma or family stigma or any of that?
Peace is priceless. And your family,
I'm going to give you that a second to settle. Wow. Agree. Please continue.
It is. And so your family's not living with you day in and day out. Your friends aren't living with you day in and day out. The only person that's living with you day in and day out is you. Right. So I'm going to be real blunt. I don't give a shit what anyone else thinks, and neither should you. If you have found your peace and your happiness, then you hang on to that and don't let it go for anyone ever.
Yes. Absolutely. So you are thinking about writing a book, is that correct? Or you are writing a book?
I'm in the process of writing one.
Sorry to ask, but I want to read it, so I'm excited. I gotta know.
I'm in the process of writing one for a couple of reasons. I dislike how people view the courts, and I don't think it's because of any fault of their own. I go back to what you originally said, talks about the media is the one that kind of dictates people's framework for the court system. And I think if people understood the court system better, they would be more willing to utilize the court system, which can be super beneficial in certain circumstances.
Yeah.
I also think there is some, like, somehow attorneys are the gatekeepers to all the secrets that are the court systems. And I don't think that's true. We just have lived and breathed it, so we know it. And people can understand it too. I have seen some pro se litigants that, quite frankly, do it better than some of the attorneys I know. And I also have a story of my life and what I've been through from childhood to even now that talks about the power of resilience, the power of keep putting one foot in front of the other, and you will get through it. I have an ode to red lipstick. It's like my battle armor. I don't have it on today, but on my first day of every trial, I've got this red that I've worn for years.
Yes.
But yeah, I want to inspire, in particular, younger women, and even women my age, but younger women, to understand what their power is, to embrace it, and to not waste their youth trying to not be their authentic selves. Because there is so much power in who you are as a person that you should never dampen your spirit or dampen your spark for anyone. And I know as younger women, we quite often do that. And I have become happier the older I've gotten because I just have to go back. I don't care anymore.
Yes.
You're either going to like me or you don't. If you don't, well, okay. That's on you. It doesn't affect my daily life.
Nope. Yes, absolutely.
So the younger generation is supposed to stand on our shoulders. I know that there's a bunch of older female attorneys that really had it tough breaking in with what was a very male-dominated world. It made it easier for me to practice and easier for me to be. I embrace my femininity in courtroom. I don't try to be a man in a man's world. I am authentically me in the courtroom.
Yes.
But I want the younger generation to be able to stand on our shoulders and get a step ahead above us earlier on, because we've made that pathway for them possible. And I want them to learn there's more to their self-worth than some of the TV shows that I will not name that are on that seem to point the value towards something else other than being your authentic self.
Right. Absolutely. I think that is a very important thing to be passing down, especially considering that we need to, pave that road for them to come after us, especially our own daughters. I mean, I'm 41 now, and we're still at the place where we're just like getting to, we're people. Oh, we can be people? That's great. We should be people. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm just now, 40s have been my favorite by far, because I'm just sitting like, I don't care anymore. Like, it's just like the amount of time I spent, I wish I had it back,
At 45, and this would happen to me, and you'll remember this. You will remember this on your 45th birthday. It is like a switch flips at 45, and it is the best thing ever because it's like, take it or leave it, boys. This is me.
Yep. Yeah.
But 45, there was a switch for me, and thank God there was. Now, if only I had that switch at 30, I'd be so much farther ahead now, but it took a while.
I know. Same. If I had known then what I know now, the amount of time I wasted trying to be smaller, trying to be quieter, trying to not stand out the way I always do. And it's just like, it's terrible, because that's your path to self-realization. That's your path to happiness. That's your path to finding yourself. As I try to raise this daughter and even my son, I'm just like, oh, y'all, like, don't do any of this. Like, please just skip that entire thing. Like, skip that entire mountain. There's nothing on it. It's sand. Like, just go around, you
get to the top and you're like, this was it?
This is terrible. I hate it here. Yes. Yeah, exactly. This is terrible. I hate it here. There are no friends of value here. There are no, partners of value here. It's terrible. I'm devastated. I should have listened to My grandmother is what I think. I should
Yeah,
have listened to
I should have listened to my grandmother as well. Grandma Jan,
Right?
she had
Oh,
some great advice.
God. I mean, I think we just need Golden Girls to come back. Like, I think like we just need to, I can't even, right? We need B. Arthur back. Anyhow.
We so need B. Arthur back.
We need B. Arthur back. I mean, some Blanche outfits with the sparkles. Oh man, I'm for it. I'm for it.
I'm all about
Right?
sparkles. Anything I
Yes.
put sparkles on, I'll
Yes.
bedazzle anything at this point.
Absolutely. I love that for us. It's 2024 and we're all still alive. So we should be wearing more sparkles. Anyhow.
That's right.
So I love this. I love this conversation. I know I can't take your entire day. How do people follow you, support you, work with you in the future?
Well, I'm really easy to find. I'm on Instagram as Attorney Michele Locke. I have my own website, which is michelelocke.com. The only thing I tell people is my Michelle, thank you to my mother, is 1L, not 2. But make sure, but I'm easily findable. I'm on LinkedIn under Michele Locke as well. I love to answer questions to the extent that I can answer them from people, but anytime anyone needs any kind of uplifting, I'm always here to help for that.
Right. Well, you are an incredible person, Judge Michele. I'm so excited that I could have you here this morning. So thanks for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me. It's really been fun.
I know. I didn't expect the conversations to go off into such a diatribe, but I'm glad to have it just the same.
That's the problem when you get an attorney on. We can talk for way too long.
Or any Southerner. I have found that I get chatting with Southern folks and it's just like I could do it all day.
Mm-hmm.
Woo! Right? All right, y'all, thank you for tuning in today. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the Indomitable Podcast for more incredible stories of humaning. Remember, my new book, Indomitable, A Foster Care Story, is available wherever you get your books. And finally, as ever, I am so happy to have you here in community with me. And remember, together we are truly indomitable. Have a great week, everybody, and take care.